You better starting off in the. Oh, that's so gross.
That is in the upper respiratory area. Today's podcast, our second overall, is soccer game style. So maybe it's 12 minutes, maybe it's 2 hours. We're just not going to let you know. Besides how long the video says it is. Questions were created by Ari and ChatGPT.
Is cancel culture an effective way to hold individuals and organizations accountable, or does it stifle free speech and promote mob mentality? Go.
Can I ask you a question off of that?
Yes.
Can you define stifle?
Does it like promote essentially? Does it like promote? Or I'm sorry, stifle would probably. I'm guessing stifle means does it conflict with? Final answer.
Nice. Cancel culture is not an effective way to hold individuals and organizations accountable because, in my opinion, it just silences their voice and creates a outrage. The best way to prove an individual or an organization, which is basically a bunch of individuals together, as wrong is to allow them to say their point in an open dialogue and then allow other people to argue against that point and then have people view both points and make a decision for themselves. When you take the voice away from one party, you're not just making the other party seem that their point is valid and the person that was canceled is invalid. It is a negative output for the future of the world when you shut down one side of the argument instead of having both sides be able to explain their argument. People are smart and reasonable for the most part, and they're going to make a decision based on logic. But if you make an emotional decision by canceling someone, it's not logical and it has negative, illogical repercussions.
I agree with most of that, but I guess a follow-up question to that would be, what if someone's just a horrible person and this person maybe has a reputation for being negative or a certain way and impacts a lot of different people? What if there is somebody that has a lot of power and they're known for doing horrible things or treating their employees horrible at a company or something of that sort, and it's just widely known? What if someone pops up like that? And in that situation, would you favor cancel culture if it means getting someone who's obviously a bad asset out of the position that they're in?
I will say this definitively that I disagree with canceling anybody in this world because hearing their argument is allowing them to cancel themselves and decrease their audience. And the audience that stays with them, they are going to have the same type of response from the world. Cancel culture, along with AI and the worries around AI, is who is setting the criteria. Because if we set up these guidelines around cancel culture and it's coming from people in power that are maybe swayed one side or the other, and they have certain interests in monetary ideals, business ideals, or personal drive, then that is a blanket for the rest of the people that maybe don't agree with that. So I think less rules and let the people decide is always the better option, because that is how America is here in the first place, is by a small group of people voicing out their opinions, fighting for it. And that is one of the biggest reasons that we have freedom in America, because for the most part of the almost 400 years that America has been established, we've had free speech. And in countries where there isn't free speech, everyone wants to leave, but they can't say it because cancel there is they cancel your life.
That makes sense. I like that answer. Thought that would trip you, but it didn't. Is the widespread use of facial recognition technology an invasion of privacy or a necessary tool for public safety?
I think with most things, As convenience rises, risk also rises. As we move away from cash into credit cards and digital banking, it's a lot easier, but now you have a lot more risk to having it stolen and online scams. I was extremely annoyed, sort of pissed off when I was coming back into the United States from Europe a few years ago, and I walk up to the counter in customs, and they say stand in front of this. It was like a Logitech like C920 webcam. I walk up to it. Don't give them any information about myself. Don't say my name or anything. I just stand up in front of this camera and stare at it, and then they're like, "Hello, EJ Donahue, and welcome back to the United States." I was like, uh, that makes me feel uncomfortable. So on one hand, I think people in um, like predicaments, especially in the first world countries that use facial recognitions to unlock their phones, and then their phones can fill in their passwords using facial recognition. That is a concern, a huge concern. It also has the benefit of traveling. If someone's trying to play around with name and paperwork, well, we have your face. And I think for that risk, is it worth it? For security, it is worth it, but there has to be things implemented where people can't take your face, which I don't even know if you can. Like if I stole someone's phone, I looked up their Facebook page or their LinkedIn and then held their phone up to the camera on the phone, if it would unlock the phone, and then I would have access to all their data. So in that sense, it's scary. But again, I think it's just weighing convenience versus risk.
Like I'm seeing people now pull up photos and AI is generating corporate headshots for them. Like you can create any kind of photo basically from an old photo of you. And that scares me too, that anybody can just use it. If you do give more people the choice as to what is being used with facial recognition and what is not, there's probably a lot of stuff that, like you mentioned banking or even just apps. Like there's probably apps like TikTok that have it in their terms and conditions, but how many times do people even read that stuff when they're signing up for it? Companies are probably hiding it in places that they know people are too lazy to look. How can society strike a balance between freedom of speech and the prevention of online hate speech and misinformation? Loaded question. I know. Hello.
I think from 2020 up to even now, we saw the government try and take a strong stance on what they consider hate speech. And I think hate speech, for the most part, is subjective. How it affects you is subjective because it's an individual assessment. I am always less censorship. I think the government tried, succeeded, and failed all in one to limit the discussion and the blowback on masks, COVID, and multiple other stories over the past few years, especially. You can see from data released by social media companies that they were working with to also enforce what they wanted to be said and what they didn't want to be said. And a lot of things around vaccines and masks, just for an example, were labeled as hateful and dangerous, and then a year or two later come out in scientific studies that they were wrong, and so they were silencing people and canceling people, labeling it as hate speech for years, only to come out and be wrong. I'm against the government having control over most things. A lot of things in the US government especially move very slow. A president has only so much control. There's all these different systems that are designed hundreds of years ago based on what was going on in Britain at the time. And these rules are very hard to change. And once things are added or taken away in the government, again, very hard to manipulate. But when they have the power, they can manipulate them in any which way they want. These guidelines that are set by the government are based on the people that are in the government. As we've seen throughout time, it's Republican, Democrat going back and forth every 4 or 8 years. And I don't want rules set by people that aren't going to be there forever. I would rather leave as much freedom and opportunity to the American people, and they will decide what is best. And the things that aren't best will die out and be crushed by the overwhelming majority.
That's a good point. I actually have a follow-up question to that. So I agree with you. I think I think the less censoring there is, the better. Do you think that if the majority of our news outlets was more freelance writers, like as opposed to like your big brand names of newspapers, news stations, do you think it would be, do you think the public would accept public news and more if the writers and the people publicizing these things were all more independent as opposed to being affiliated with a certain station that has clear views in one direction and pushes, their personal agenda?
CNN is dying, Fox News is dying, Twitter, Substack, Rumble, all these other places that have independent writers are thriving and continue to thrive because people realize, especially over the past few years, that everything coming out of these big media sources is scripted, and the people that saying it either are full of crap or they're getting paid to not voice their opinion and say whatever the bull crap that they're being scripted to say. And the American public, for the most part, disagrees with it, and it's showing out in the numbers because less viewership, and the viewership is going to the individual people like Tucker Carlson, other two people that left that are on breaking points, Sagar and Crystal, that both left CNN and Fox News because they don't believe what the corporation is telling them to say, and so they leave. And it shows in the viewership that all these major news sources are dying out, and podcasts are growing at a crazy rate because people want truth, and the truth isn't coming through these big corporations because they have to worry about backlash, and individual creators don't have to worry about backlash because if people like them, they'll follow them. If not, they will unfollow them, block them. That's fine. People give people the options. The places like North Korea, Russia, China that have government controlled news agencies control the people and control the information that the people get. Welcome to America. We're not with that shit.
Is the rise of virtual reality and augmented reality blurring the lines between the real and virtual worlds, and what are the consequences of them? I know you're a fan of the virtual reality, so I'm interested to hear his answer on this one. Is virtual reality still a little bit like underdeveloped right now? Like it's like coming out, but it's not. Do you think it's full blown to the point where it's going to cause a lot of problems?
I think Instagram is a form of virtual reality. People are showing a certain side of their reality online, and it's usually the positive over the negative, as is widely explained. I think in the future, this will be much more of a problem, and that problem is probably going to come down to actors, as we're seeing with this strike and what they're saying with using their face and voice through AI. Even Bruce Willis, I saw just talking over a deal to release his name and likeness with everything that he said for commercials using AI. I don't know if he signed that or not, but that was a deal. Anyone that is heavy into video gaming and understands technology, the Oculus and the other types of virtual reality headsets are nowhere near close to reality. The gamings will get a lot better. I think once you get to the point of being able to put on a headset and doing tasks or playing games where you physically feel what is going on, that is when it's going to start blurring lines. I don't think we're there yet, and I don't think we're close to being there yet. This discussion of virtual reality, this was being talked about when I was 15, 16. As something that was going to be coming out in the next 5 years, 10 years. Over 10 years has gone by, and we're still nowhere close to being there. It doesn't blur the lines yet, but it definitely could.
I feel like we're a lot closer to feeling a virtual reality than we might all think. I think that technology might even be out there already, and they're just not quite as developed to release to the public. But I would agree with you that social media is a form of virtual reality as well. Right now, I feel like social media is creating an idea and a concept, like a precursor to what our reality or virtual reality is going to look like 10 years from now or whatever. So I think that's the scary part is there's already a lot of false news out there, and we already know social media has a strong pull on mental health and just young minds who are viewing things in a certain way when it's blasted all over social media. So I think that's probably what's even scarier is just kind of setting the precursor to what's to come, and almost as if it's a given and there's not going to be any other way in the future. Do you have anything else to say on that?
Especially with first world countries, like a lot of our reality is already virtual. Like our phones have our financial, our friends, navigation, travel, all of that is virtual. So our realities, especially since COVID, have even been more virtual. Zoom, online teams, and Google Meetups and Clubhouse, a lot of people working remote, a huge rise in virtual jobs. A lot of people's reality is all virtual. I don't see that going backwards. Reality is going to be more and more virtual. The consequences are going to be felt just like how COVID had people feeling alone, not a true sense of fulfillment, and away from. We are creatures, we're not robots, and we are not meant to be fully encapsulated in virtual. We feel good when we're in the woods, we feel good when we're in the water, we feel good when we're around animals, and that's not going to be able to transfer through a virtual device. There's always going to need balance, but productivity and life enjoyment is better with technology, but there just becomes a balance. When you have this stuff in your face all the time, you need to find a way to get back to homeostasis, and that is being involved in nature, being around other people in a real time, and having shared experiences in person with more factors than whatever your phone is allowing you to do. That's all I have to say on that.
I agree. I think that kind of goes a little hand in hand with what we talked about yesterday. There is a company that I was following the CEO on LinkedIn for a while, and I saw that they were one of the first companies to create a virtual office where they were literally avatars of each person and their office and what it looked like. When you do that, it goes beyond just remote work because technology is, in a way, limited when you do that. So there's less predictable interactions, like normal things day to day that would be qualified as like an unknown, like an interaction with a coworker or something happening outside. It could be something so small, but as human beings, that's why we thrive in places like nature. We're in touch with the earth, and there's a lot more unknown going around us. Even if we're take the same hike every day, you're still feeling that feeling because there's so much around you that is not controllable on your end. Getting put in a box, have an avatar created for me to walk around my virtual office, I feel like would just drive me cuckoo. That would just minimize my experience. It's way different than remote work, virtual reality in a virtual office. It's crazy.
They're trying to take what you get out of real life and put it into a virtual setting, and it doesn't work. That's not what people want. Humans are not robots, and we can sense the BS, and that is BS, and no one wants it.
Is the hashtag #MeToo movement an essential catalyst for change, or are there concerns about its impact on due process and innocent until proven guilty? The Me Too movement definitely changed the way that women that are victims of abuse or anything in that regard. I feel like it did provide a sense of comfort for women that they feel more confident to speak out. The Me Too movement was so loud and is so loud, especially on social platforms, which, as we've talked about, creates a lot of our reality at the moment. But on the other hand, I do think there are people out there that don't tell the truth. Like, I'm not saying it in every case, but I think there are cases where there are crazy people out there. I'm not talking about your standard good head on your shoulders person who really is using that movement to help create positive change, but there are people out there that do want to screw other people over or bend the truth just for more personal gain, whatever that looks like. It's kind of ridiculous to just flat out say no, there's no concerns with that, but I do think has been a huge positive impact on women for the sake of I can speak out. It became more normalized after that, like speaking out against what happened to you. So in that sense, I think it was a huge plus for women, but I think there's always concerns with things like that, especially when it's on such a public forum.
There is multiple generations in multiple hierarchies of businesses and life in general, and they were grown up with different standards, and those standards are always changing. And I think it's important to set the precedent that women are not objects and that they are not lesser of a gender. And that was being shown to sort of be the norm in some of these businesses and like in Hollywood with Harvey Weinstein. And the net change of that movement is positive because it's allowed women to speak up with confidence when they feel they are not being treated fairly with anything in this world. There are people that suck and they're going to take advantage of it. The only gripe I have with the Me Too movement is stuff that we see all the time with men in all occupations that will have an allegation against them that falls into the Me Too movement of sexual assault. A news article come out about a man that is a celebrity or athlete or anyone that has something to lose and they have an allegation against them, your immediate thought is guilty. A lot of the cases that have come out since all of the valid cases of Me Too end up being false allegations, but the false allegation comes a year or more past when they were fired, blacklisted from everything, reputation destroyed, and that is a huge problem. Something needs to be changed, not even on a legal standpoint, but a cultural standpoint, that just because someone is accused, the judicial system needs to move quicker to exonerate or put these people behind bars or whatever the repercussions are. I've seen just a lot of men that have been charged with allegations of sexual assault, been fired, lost their reputation, lost families, and then come out a year or two later that the accusation was false. And so for some people, they use this as a weapon to ruin people's lives. And for a lot of other people, it's a way to stand up against, something that happened to them that is wrong, and they want to ruin that precedent. So it's a double-edged sword. I think the better part of the sword is helping women out, but there's a deep dagger in accusing someone of something that's false and then ruining everything in their life forever or years to come based on false accusation. So I think with a lot of cases, there's two sides to both the stories, but the bad side being a man is that someone could say I did something that I didn't do, and everyone believes that I'm guilty until it's proven innocent, and then even after I'm proven innocent, there's still this lingering feeling of guilt from people because they sort of had this allegation, and then a long time went where they just sort of had this in their mind that the allegation is true because they've been charged with it. And then it's sort of like people don't hear this news story for the most part years later that it was false.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it's definitely promoted probably more good than bad, but you can never make everybody happy and everything has risk to it. So I think that's just realistic talking about both sides of it.
Yeah.
Is there a need for specific men's mental health initiatives to address issues like male suicide rates and emotional expression stigma? There should be more initiatives around men's mental health. I think there should be more common practices and publicity around resources for men because as we've learned with things like the Me Too movement, social media and news outlets, they can promote anything that they would like to. And I think it is something that is underrepresented in our world. Women naturally, I think, are more emotional than men. And speaking firsthand, I know that. But I do, like, for me, I wish that there were more resources and more normalized practices around men's mental health so that there's more freedom to communicate. I think the more communication there is, the better relationships are. And when there's a stereotype that a man has to keep everything in, make sure that everything's okay and that their family's taken care of and that there's not a care in the world, is really just delaying the inevitable because we're human beings and we all go through hard shit. And the stigma that men shouldn't have to, go to therapy or have more resources around that, I think it's just more comfortability. Do you think men would feel more comfortable if there was more promoted resources for men on mental health?
I think men would feel more comfortable if they stopped being soft as hell and did more uncomfortable things that improve their discipline and listen to podcasts like Joe Rogan that is very sensitive and soft when he talks about different ideas and his feelings, but does hard stuff and explains the benefits of it. I think Andrew Tate is another one of these that sort of stands up for, he says some wild things about women, but everything he says about men is true. And I think a lot of people are chasing comfortability, and that isn't the carrot that you want to run towards. A lot of people work better off of fear and pain, use that as a fire instead of using it as ammunition to go hurt other people. Men deal with their problems different than women, and I don't think that's a bad thing. I was in this spot where I didn't know what to do. My mental health was in a crappy spot, and it's people like Joe Rogan, it's people like Patrick Bet David, it's people like Nick Bear that it's not that they justify the feelings, but they felt that too. And this is the hard things that they did to get past it. And I think the solution isn't a blanket that can cover everyone. You just have to try stuff, whether it's mushrooms to hiking to lifting to video games to business. Like it's all individual. The biggest thing is to not stop trying, because in my mind, stop trying is killing yourself. And killing yourself doesn't hurt you, it hurts everyone that loves you. And I heard this quote that suicide is like wearing a vest with a bunch of bombs on it and walking into a room and blowing up with everyone that you love in that room. And I heard that quote when I was in a dark place, and it really made me conceptualize what I care about in life and what I don't. And I think sometimes people are just too stressed out in their heads and they just need to go take a walk. That's all I gotta say about that.
I like that. I know that you pretty much like your entire transformation over the last, really ever since I've known you, everything has skyrocketed in a positive direction once you started listening to those people and feeling a sense of community because you didn't feel so alone. But so I agree with that. But as far as like specific initiatives for men, like what do you think would push the majority of men to go do that and start finding those people that they can relate to? And like, it's easy to just say like, we'll go do this, but what type of initiatives do you think would help to reach a larger population of men, to drive them in that direction?
So when I was in a bad place mentally, I didn't know how to fix it. But like I said, I was listening to Joe Rogan and some of these other people. And the key theme with all these other people that I listen to is that they all exercise. And I was, an athlete, but, it was very sports specific and added a lot of stress. It wasn't just walking or strength training. So my mindset was, if I can't fix myself mentally, there's scientific proven facts that cardiovascular, like walking, zone 2 level cardio, has a impact on your brain. The way you look or the way you feel both intertwine. Just try and turn your mind off and work on your body and move your body physically, and the mind will come. I know that's what happened with me. My mind was in a crap place. I just started moving my body every day, turning my mind off. Even if I didn't want to do it, just still doing hard stuff. Hard stuff is uncomfortable, and uncomfortable that is hard, that is repetitively done consistently, creates strong men. That is how I've changed my life. I think that is a blanket that can be tossed on anyone. Doing hard stuff, and even if you don't achieve it, trying as hard as you can too will get you out of a lot of dark places.
I love that. I think I picked this up a lot from you, but I agree. Doing hard things and actually like making whether a list or just choosing a couple things or one thing that you can do every day that is an attainable hard thing. Because there's a lot of really hard things out there, like starting a company, going off and doing your own thing, but there's so many bite-sized hard things that you can do that will help build your endurance mentally. A minute in a cold shower, and that was something that I knew was really hard to do. Like nobody likes to, well, maybe there are people that like to take a cold shower. I don't. I would prefer my showers warm, but I knew that I could do it if I wanted to. It was something that not a lot of people do, and I found pride in myself when I was able to complete it. There were some mornings where I skipped it because I just thought it was too hard, and then the next day I'd wake up and think, "It's absolutely ridiculous that I thought I couldn't do that because I absolutely could have." There was nothing that but to gain from that because I would step out, and it was almost like my body understood the high level of anxiety, like the feeling similar feeling of anxiety was what the cold shower brought me, and then the rest of the day, like my body would just kind of regulate on its own because if I could overcome a high level of stress that early in the morning before I started my job, which was very stressful, um, on its own, my body started to recognize that and started to kind of neutralize itself. So I like that. Find the bite-sized pieces.